What's going on, Metropolitans? Today, with Frankie Montas out 6 to 8 weeks with a lat injury, there are some people clamoring that we reunite with Jose Quintana. Plus, Steve Cohen is kind of miffed that the Mets are 18th in MLB attendance, but this guy, me? I kind of side with the boss man. We'll talk about it on this edition of Mets Digest. What's going on, everybody? Flobo Boyce here, rocking with you. Thanking you so much for making this channel part of your Mets diet. We are growing by leaps and bounds, but of course, almost 4,000 people on this channel would not have been a thing if it wasn't for those subscriptions. So do us a favor, if you like what we're putting down, make sure you like the video, make sure you subscribe to the channel, and give me some comments. I know today it's going to get a little spicy. First things first, though, let's talk about Jose Quintana. You can't really talk about him without talking about Frankie Montas. Frankie Montas was signed by the Mets over the offseason to be one of those reclamation projects, but already has gone down. Lat strain, 6 to 8 weeks, and you know when it comes to lats and obliques, there may be a little bit more when it comes to ramping people up to full health. And so there really has been two schools of thought about what the Mets are supposed to do. Is it supposed to be what David Stearns says, a next man up situation where we just have the next person in line, maybe even get some of the rookies involved? And I know let the kids play may be a real thing with Brandon Sproat and even Jonah Tong projected to be part of the rotation at some point in 2025, or do we go back into our bag of tricks into that magical 2024 season and bring back some elements that brought us to the promised land? So this morning, this is Wednesday as I record this, I came across this tweet by Pat Ragazza, who has a Ragazza report, who is kind of or I would say better than most when it comes to being a credible idea. He says this, per source. He says, Jose Quintana is very interested in a reunion with the Mets and will love to come back. And first, I didn't think much of it. Of course, I go, yeah, the last person that employed you and you did well on the team, of course you want to be back. Jose Quintana is 36. There weren't many people out to sign him. Indeed, it's the end of February. Spring training is in full swing, and there really isn't any other team linked to Quintana with maybe the Padres, but that's truly and strictly at the rumor level. So when I was kind of shocked and surprised that later on today, we had a report from Steve Phillips. Now, Steve Phillips is a former GM who is a contributor to both MLB Network and MLB Network Radio, the Sirius XM channel, by the way. Not an advertisement, but I'm a fan of that network. A lot of great personalities on there. And he was talking about what the Mets can do, knowing that Frankie Montas won't be healthy as the season starts. And much like the Ragazza report, or the Ragazza tweet, had mentioned, why not go back for Jose Quintana? And this is where it gets pretty freaky. You know what I mean? He says, quote, they have depth, that's the Mets, but I will go out and get another guy just to protect them. Jose Quintana was great for them. 3.75 ERA last year. I would go bring him back in. Nobody signed him, so go get it done. Bring him back, add to the depth. He's a good guy and will fit well on the team. Not necessarily a ring endorsement. It's kind of like hedging his bets, but I can't knock it. I mean, it's not necessarily a bad decision. It just feels like the team has already employed a whole different philosophy. Check the numbers, though. Pretty solid stuff. Even though that win-loss record is about 500, or 50%, it doesn't really tell the whole story of Jose Quintana. He was quite frankly, one of the worst pitchers in rotation in the beginning of the summer. In fact, there was a video way back in the Mets Digest archives where I was asking, what's the problem with Q? But then towards the end, went on a torrid pace to argue that he was a second ace or ace 1A compared to Sean Manaea in that 2024 rotation. Pitching high leverage situations and really got himself to some respectable numbers when it's all said and done. But the thing I wanted to draw your attention to is that bottom right-hand corner. 36 in 26 days of this recording. Not necessarily a spring chicken, which can say, one, he's cheap, but two, you're worried about the durability, whether or not he was to be signed with the Mets in 2025. So I ask you this. If you were the GM of the Mets right now, if you were the president of baseball operations, would you sign Jose Quintana? Would you pick up the phone and see if you could run it back? Would you try to get somebody else first? I mean, Jose Iglesias is still not signed. You know what I mean? People say he's a bigger priority if the Mets were going to go back in time. Or would you say, no, we understood the rotation wasn't going to wow anybody on paper. We understand injuries are part of the game. It's definitely a next man up situation. It's a rookie situation. It's a new opportunity situation. This is totally and completely reactionary. What's wrong with y'all? I'm just kind of curious to what you think about the Jose Quintana situation situation. I, for one, can go either way. I lean towards letting people play up to the rotate. You still got Griffin Canning, who's in the mix. You still got Paul Blackburn, who has to be on his own redemption arc following that really freaky spinal leaking fluid issue he had last season. And of course, you got Tyler McGill, who looks like he's going to be a Met for life, the way he just happens to show up every single year to be in the conversation. So I do think David Stearns accounted for that. I think he accounted for injuries. I think that was part of the plan. I do think getting Quintana, even though the good vibes were there, is a kind of reactionary move. And if a bad patch happens, say in July or August, will we be as patient with him this season with all the expectations as we were last season, where we're just kind of like, happy to be here. Let me know what you think. Plus, let's moving on to the next subject. Steve Cohen, again, is on a tour to say, look, I've done everything I can as the owner. Show up to games, suckers. It's kind of happened a couple days ago. I was listening to the Meet at the Apple podcast where Steve had just basically said, I want to kind of wish that more fans came out to games. That episode was released Monday. It was recorded Friday, so I didn't think much of it. In fact, it really wasn't a big deal. But then when I saw other news outlets talking about WFAN, if you're familiar, they're the radio station in New York City, just totally blasting Cohen or blasting the fans for saying, no, Cohen's right, I realized this was a bigger issue than I thought. As it stands right now, we'll get to the quote that Steve Cohen says, the Mets stand I'm looking at the chart right here. That's why I'm pointing off screen. The Mets stand 18th out of 30 of all major league teams in attendance. That's behind the Padres, behind the Dodgers, behind the Yankees, the Cubs, the Cardinals, the Astros, the Blue Jays. At 18th, we draw less fans in than Arizona, which blows my mind. That to me almost sounds like an insult. But again, we do have more fans coming into our turnstiles as of last year of teams like the Guardians, the Reds, the Nats, the Twins, the Tigers, and the Chicago White Sox. Truthfully, the Chicago White Sox were an anomaly last year. Their record was just really bad. So I kind of understand why fans have not gone. But I wanted to ask you why Mets fans don't go to games. And I know there's a couple of reasons we have ready to go, stock answers. But hold that thought. I want you to see what Steve Cohen said. Shout out to Abby Mashako at Times, West Virginia. She said, Steve Cohen looked around Citi Field last season and didn't like what he saw. The empty seats in August and September were shocking to Mets owner and CEO. The team was in the midst of a heated battle for a playoff spot with the division rivals in Atlanta and the reigning NL champs in Arizona. How could fans not want to get in on the action? Quote, I didn't like it, Cohen said Tuesday at Clover Park. Quote, that really bothered me. 18th in attendance, and we're right in the pennant race. I gotta be honest with you. Bossman's right. Absolutely. There is no excuse why the Mets fan base has not shown up the way it is. And people will say this, hey, look, man, times are hard. Understood. I live in a city right now where a dozen eggs set me back $8.25. Gasoline is $4.80 a gallon in my neighborhood, and I cry every time someone adds a fee or tip whenever I go and buy something. So yes, times are hard. I understand that. I also understand the Mets charging $40 for parking is kind of high. But I will say the Dodgers charge $30 for their parking, and then those fans show up and show out. In fact, the Dodgers are the most attended baseball franchise of 2024. Is it an issue of it being too far? Is it like, hey man, I work hard on my job. I don't have time to go to Citi Field after work. Well, the team has tried to work with the MTA to have more service around game times. Or is it kind of like a, hey look, I want to go, but there's nothing to do before or after games? Okay, it could be understood. That's understandable. Metropolitan Park, if it happens, is kind of a couple of years away at best. Maybe not even off the ground at worst for things for people to do before and after games. Is food too expensive? You could bring some things in. I don't quite understand. I really don't. 18th is abysmal. I understand there are two teams in our city. The Yankees charge more for their games on average. I'm looking at some of the games this season. Games start at $6 for a lot of them. So is it a price issue? Or, and I'm being bold here, I say this as a lifelong fan, are we just gun shy? Are we snake bit? There's more seasons where the Mets have losing records than winning records. Do we just feel that we don't have a chance of winning? Do we not believe in our team? Do we think that the bottom's going to fall out every time we have some luck that we go, well, I don't know? And I wonder that. Maybe just me speculating. because we can say things are expensive, yeah, but Formula One doesn't have an attendance issue. The Super Bowl doesn't have an attendance issue. Beyonce don't have an attendance issue, and she can't even pitch. I'm just putting it out there. I just want to know what you guys think. Steve Cohen has done what he's done. He's done what he's could. I mean, he's invested in the team's infrastructure. He's added some talent, able to cut dead weight when that talent didn't work out. Yeah, the Mets haven't won the World Series championship. I get that. But he's put in more effort than the last owners have by a wide margin. I don't know. Maybe if you've gone to one game last season, try going to two. If you got to 2 games last season, try to go for 3. I mean, I always say challenge yourself to do more games. I'm going to do it myself. I live in Los Angeles as I record this. I go to 2 games at Citi Field this season. I see about 6 or 8 games when they're playing the Giants or the Dodgers or the Padres. I might go home. See my dad, take him out to a game, drag him out, and for a couple more games to see the season. Because Steve Cohen's right. We love our team, top to bottom. You wouldn't be here if you weren't. Let's go pay it back. Let's go support guys that really put day in, day out work for us. I'm talking about Lindor, I'm talking about Soto, I'm talking about Alonso, my tribal chief, Sean Manaea. Let's show up and show out. But if I'm missing something, if it's not the travel, if it's not the money, if you feel slighted by the people at the park, let me know in the comments below. I really am genuinely curious as to what prevents you or your friends, and it doesn't have to be, I'm not accusing you of going to games. But that does it for me, though. I got to get out of here. In the meantime, I'll be back soon enough to talk more Mets with you. It's the Orange and Blue crew. And until next time, as always, it's LGM to the bitter end.